Israel is reportedly working on a detailed plan to divide war-torn Syria into cantons, a proposal that would allegedly be aimed at preserving the rights of the country's ethnic and religious minorities. The plan, which has been discussed at high levels by Israeli officials, including Energy Minister Eli Cohen, is said to have emerged after the significant shifts in Syria's political landscape following a regime change. This development, though not yet fully implemented or publicly confirmed, raises complex geopolitical questions and concerns regarding the future of Syria, regional stability, and Israel's role in the Middle East. The ongoing civil war in Syria has ravaged the country for over a decade, leaving millions dead, displaced, or without access to basic services. The war has fractured the nation along various ethnic, religious, and political lines, with Kurdish groups, Sunni Arabs, and Alawites, among others, all vying for influence and control. The Assad regime, primarily composed of the Alawite sect, has been locked in a brutal struggle with opposition forces, many of which have received external support from different regional and international actors. The concept of dividing Syria into cantons or autonomous regions is not a new idea. In fact, the idea has been floated by various parties throughout the conflict, especially as the war has seen the rise of ethnic and sectarian divides within the country. These divides have been exacerbated by the involvement of multiple foreign powers, including the United States, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, each of which has backed different factions in the conflict based on their own strategic interests. Israel's reported involvement in such a plan has drawn considerable attention. As one of the region's most powerful and influential states, Israel has long had a vested interest in the dynamics of Syria. Its concerns primarily revolve around security, particularly in relation to the Syrian government's alliance with Iran and the presence of Iranian-backed Hezbollah fighters on Syria's border with Israel. The idea of reshaping Syria's internal structure could, in theory, limit the influence of groups hostile to Israel by creating a more fragmented and less centralized Syrian state. This could potentially weaken the Assad regime's control over the country and diminish the presence of Iran and its allies. The Israeli plan is reportedly centered around the creation of ethnically distinct zones, with Kurds, Sunnis, Alawites, and other minorities controlling specific regions of Syria. This would, according to proponents, allow these groups to govern themselves and preserve their cultural identities in a country where many have faced persecution or marginalization. However, critics argue that the plan could further deepen Syria's divisions and make reconciliation between these groups even more difficult in the future. The notion of carving up a nation-state into ethnically homogeneous regions is fraught with historical and contemporary challenges, particularly in a region like the Middle East, where boundaries have often been drawn arbitrarily and have contributed to long-standing conflicts. Syria's Kurdish population, in particular, has been at the forefront of discussions regarding autonomy. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, have been key players in the fight against ISIS and have received support from the US-led coalition. The Kurds have long sought greater autonomy or even independence, particularly in regions of northern Syria, known as Rojava, which they have controlled for much of the conflict. Any Israeli-backed effort to create Kurdish cantons could potentially strengthen Kurdish autonomy, but it could also invite backlash from neighboring Turkey, which has long feared that Kurdish autonomy might fuel separatist movements within its own borders. The proposal to divide Syria into cantons also has significant implications for the country's Sunni Arab population, which forms the majority of Syria's population. The question of how to allocate power and territory among Syria's various Sunni factions remains contentious, with different groups vying for control of strategic cities, oil fields, and border areas. A canton-based solution would likely not satisfy all Sunni factions, some of whom have supported the opposition to Assad's regime and may see this as a form of partition that perpetuates the war. For the Alawite community, which has been closely associated with the Assad regime, the creation of autonomous zones could pose an existential threat. If the Alawites are relegated to a small, isolated canton in the country's coastal regions, it could further weaken their hold on power and diminish their political and economic influence. Moreover, the Alawites could face increased insecurity if the broader Sunni population is empowered by the division of the country. For many Alawites, the survival of the Assad regime is not only a matter of political control but also of their survival as a minority group in a predominantly Sunni Arab state. At the international level, the proposed plan to divide Syria into cantons would likely attract mixed reactions. On one hand, countries like the United States and European powers may see it as a potential way to resolve the conflict in Syria by allowing for a decentralization of power. Some may argue that a decentralized Syria could pave the way for a peaceful settlement by allowing the various factions to govern themselves and avoid further conflict. On the other hand, countries like Russia, which has been a key ally of the Assad regime, and Iran, which has supported Assad's government, are unlikely to support any plan that undermines Syria's territorial integrity. Both Moscow and Tehran view the preservation of the Syrian state as critical to maintaining their influence in the region and preventing the spread of separatism. For Israel, the long-term goal of such a plan seems to be the stabilization of the region and the weakening of its adversaries. By dividing Syria into smaller, more manageable parts, Israel may hope to reduce the strategic threat posed by Iran and Hezbollah in the region. In the past, Israel has taken a keen interest in developments in Syria, particularly with regard to the movement of Iranian forces and their proxies along the Israeli border. Israel's involvement in shaping the future of Syria could be seen as a continuation of its efforts to maintain security in the region and limit the influence of Iran, which it views as a direct threat to its existence. The idea of dividing Syria into ethnic cantons also raises the specter of further displacement and humanitarian crisis. After years of war, Syria is already one of the world's largest refugee crises, with millions of people displaced both within the country and across its borders. Any further attempts to divide the country could exacerbate these displacements, leading to more instability and hardship for ordinary Syrians. The humanitarian consequences of a canton-based solution would likely be severe, especially for those who are caught in areas of conflict or who belong to minority groups that may be left without a clear protector.